A happy spring to you, but it won't be so happy if you don't do these things that I'm telling you to avoid on your lawn. I've got 7 different things you need to avoid, spring mistakes that are very common that I see people make in the lawn. Let's get started right now. Now, I run a weed control and fertilization business, so I guess this first one I'm a little partial to, but one of the huge mistakes people can make in the springtime is not applying a pre-emergent on their lawn. Now, I say the springtime, that's going to actually depend on where you live. If you're down in the south like I am, you probably need to get that down in January or February. But if you're up in the Midwest or Northeast, then the springtime is probably the ideal time, but you don't want to wait too late to get that pre-emergent down. We talk about before the soil temperatures reach 55 degrees, because that's typically when the crabgrass starts to germinate. So you want to get that pre-emergent down and watered in before that happens. Prodiamine is a very commonly used pre-emergent herbicide that is not very expensive, and that's one that I would recommend for this application. You might say, well, Jason, I missed that window. What do I do? Well, there are some other options. I mean, one good thing is if you had a lawn that was pretty clean last year, didn't have a lot of crabgrass, chances are it won't have much this year. And there's post-emergent products that you could use to control that crabgrass if you already had it in the lawn. If it's there in the summertime, we use a chemical called quinclorac, so that would be products like Drive Accelerate or Q-Ball, but you're looking for that quinclorac chemical to help knock out crabgrass from a post-emergent standpoint. If you're just a little bit late on your pre-emergent, you might could use a product called Dimension. It can help also knock out baby crabgrass if you're just a little bit late applying your pre-emergent. Now, if you use Dimension, you would want to use that in place of the prodiamine and not in addition to the prodiamine. Now, I want to use my lawn as an example for the second mistake I see people make. And you see my yard, it's basically brown, it's transitioning, it's got a little bit of green to it. But the second mistake I see people make is just a premature fertilizer. I have customers oftentimes ask me, like, when are you going to fertilize? When are you going to fertilize? Well, the problem is if I dumped a bunch of fertilizer on my yard right now, it's really not going to benefit much from it because the grass is barely growing. Now, again, and this can be different for cool season and warm season lawns. We want to fertilize when the grass is actively growing. So on a cool season lawn may have that big growth spurt in the spring and maybe another growth spurt in the fall. We want to fertilize during those times, where our warm season grasses really start taking off later in the spring and then through the summer for sure. So we want to make sure we're feeding them during that time. If I just dump a bunch of quick release fertilizer on this lawn today, the temperatures are still a little cool, it's not going to benefit the grass a lot, and you're honestly just wasting a lot of money and nutrients in the soil. And one thing that I do, and a lot of people do, and a way to get around this, if you want to fertilize early, we use a slow release fertilizer. The one I use is called Polyon by Harrell's, and what's great about it is I can put it down early before the grass is really ready for it. It basically sits there. As the weather warms and we get rain and things, then the nutrients start to release into the lawn when the grass actually needs it, and it can feed the lawn for months. So that's one way you can work around it, but the point is, don't go out there and feed your lawn when it's not very hungry and not able to use the nutrients. Unless, of course, you're going to use a slow release fertilizer like I do. You might say, well, why would you do that? Why would you put a slow release fertilizer? Why wouldn't you just wait until it needs the fertilizer? Well, one reason we do that is because by the time it needs the fertilizer, in my situation, maybe late April into May, there's also other things the lawn needs. There might be weed pressure. I might be getting an insecticide down soon. So sometimes we do it early to give us time to do other things during that really busy season. The third one I want to mention, and I did this, I think it was last year on my own yard, was scalping too early. Now, scalping may be something we do more with our warm season grasses, particularly Bermuda. So on this Bermuda lawn, you know, it got all this dormant grass here. Now, it is starting to turn green, but we want to get rid of all of this, and you can bag it or you can just scalp it down as low as it'll go. You could actually cut it all the way to the ground, it would be fine. But in my situation, I cut it down to 1.5 inches, which is as low as mine goes. And when you do that, you allow the sunlight to get down to the roots, start warming the roots, and it's going to start putting up some new growth. Now, it's not going to do it when it's super cold, but let's just say you do it in February, and early March we get a warm week, and it's starting to put up some new growth, and then boom, we get down to 18 degrees. What happens? That new tender growth gets zapped, turns it brown, and you actually end up with a slower green up than you might would have had if you'd just left it longer. I'm all for scalping a Bermuda lawn, in particular zoysia, taking it down, and other grass types, you know, getting them down, especially with our warm season grasses. But But just know that if you do it too early, you are running the risk of possibly getting a late frost that's going to zap that real tender growth. For me in the Alabama market, and it's going to change wherever you are, I typically wait on into March and cut it down to 1.5 inches, and I try to maintain it about 1.5 inches as long as possible with the Bermuda lawn. But in the summer when it starts growing like crazy, I have to slowly start raising the deck. The fourth thing I wanted to mention is overwatering. I got asked the other day, I said, hey, you know, when do we need to turn on our irrigation system? I said, well, I tell people in our situation, again, going to vary between cool season and warm season grasses, but with a warm season line, I say, hey, I wouldn't turn it on until May if it was me. I mean, because in the springtime, it's not as hot. We're getting a good bit of rain. The grass is not growing very much. It's just not nearly the same situation as July and August would present. The cool season lawn, again, I don't think it's nearly the same urgency that it would be in the summertime because it's not nearly as hot. The days are a little bit shorter. You know, there's just a lot of circumstances, but their grass is actually growing during the spring, so I could see maybe providing some water, but not near the level that you would need in the summertime. Now, are you hurting anything by watering it? Well, I don't know that you're necessarily hurting much other than your water bill. There is a sense in where in those cool spring nights, you could help feed a fungus that's developing in your lawn, or maybe even reactivate a fungus that was there in the fall, and with the perfect temperature and you pumping the water to that lawn or just getting a lot of rain, you could cause some fungus issues. And then there's weeds like nutsedge and kalinga and things of that nature. They just generally like wet areas. So if you're going to water and water and water, doveweed's another one I think of that just likes a wet lawn. So in that situation, you could actually be causing some issues for yourself and not really adding a whole lot of benefit. Now let me say this, lawns do need water. If we have the unusual circumstance where you go all of March and April with very little rain, then watering it a little bit may not be a bad idea. But just understand, it is far different than the needs that the lawn will have during the summer months. The next one I want to mention, this one I guess I'm personally frustrated by, but not mowing the lawn. And what do I mean by that? Sometimes it seems like in the springtime, that's when the weed pressure is the most. And there's one particular weed coming to mind, it's called American burnweed. Pops up in the spring. It's a very frustrating weed to deal with. It's very challenging to prevent with a pre-emergent because sometimes they say it germinates in the thatch instead of the soil. Well, the thing about it is, if you will just cut the grass, you'll get rid of the vast majority of it. If you cut it twice, you may get rid of almost all of it. So a lot of times when we get a call back from a weed control and fertilization business in the spring, and they say, hey, I got weeds, or it's a new customer that had a yard full of weeds, you go spray it, the weeds are basically dead. But I tell people, it's not a magic act. They don't disappear. They're just sitting there in the lawn, half dead, and when you'll cut them with the lawnmower, they won't come back. And you'll get a call back 2 or 3 weeks later, say, hey, I still got weeds. You go out there, it's a bunch of brown weeds that are basically dead. I'm like, just cut the grass. Of course, I say it real nice to my customer in that situation, but if they would just mow the grass, those weeds wouldn't come back. So whether you got half dead weeds that's already been sprayed, or you got live weeds, mowing the grass will just help the turf quality and also definitely help you with the weed control for your lawn. It might help you have a better relationship with your weed control and fertilization company because they'll certainly appreciate it. The sixth one I need to explain myself a little bit on, and that's top dressing the lawn. And what I mean by that is you have a top dressing and you come in and you put sand or topsoil or some kind of mixture on the lawn. Well, I don't think that's a bad idea. I just want you to be cautious of when you do it and how you do it. So sand, you know, is very great for leveling a lawn, but not necessarily great for growing grass. So we would recommend if you're gonna put sand on, just do very little and level it out. But my thing is, if you're gonna do it, I wanna wait until the grass is really growing. I don't wanna dump a lot of sand or even topsoil on the lawn and then have to wait 2 months for the grass to come up through there. So I'm probably gonna push it just a little bit later in the spring when the grass is really growing. And then I wanna also be careful how much I put on there. I'm not looking to bury my lawn in a beach and then hope that one day it can come up through that. So just using a little bit, and I personally like kind of a sand topsoil mixture especially if you're going to do more than just a very little bit. If you're just doing just a 1/4 of an inch or so, yes, you can do sand to level it out. Sand's great for leveling. But if you're going to do more than that, in my area they call it like super soil. It's sand and topsoil. It has the leveling qualities, but a little bit more nutrients in it that's going to be better for growing your turf. And the last one I've learned from the hard way, and that is spraying a herbicide on your lawn during the spring transition. Now, it doesn't mean you can't spray any weeds during spring transition, but I think you got to be careful. I'm thinking particularly of a yard. I've got it in my mind. It may be scarred there forever, but I sprayed a centipede lawn with metsulfuron, which is a very cheap product that we use to kill weeds, and I did it during the spring transition, and I'm telling you, it turned the yard yellow and it lasted for a long time. You got to be a little bit careful during that spring transition. Now, on a Bermuda zoysia lawn, typically they're fine, but even then, depending on what product you're using, probably better to do it while they're still dormant or after they're fully green. On a centipede or St. Augustine lawn, definitely better while they're still dormant or after they're fully green. So if I had a centipede lawn today that had a bunch of weeds in it, I would say, listen, I'm just going to wait just a little bit longer. Once it turns green, I'm going to come in there with a product like Change Up. I can do a blanket application and knock out just about every broadleaf weed in that yard. So my encouragement, if you got a yard full of weeds, especially a centipede or St. Augustine, you may mow it. You may have to live with the weeds a little bit and let it turn green before you go in there and just spray the whole thing with a herbicide. Now, if Bermuda zoysia, be a little bit more aggressive. Again, certain products, like I just finished spraying Dismiss on my Bermuda yards. That's known can cause some turf discoloration. I was in a hurry to try to get all my yards done before the grass started turning green because I didn't want to run that risk. So just understand the product you're using. Some products are more likely to cause discoloration than others, but to understand that there is a little bit more risk in delaying the green up if you spray it during spring transition. Hope this has helped you. If you hadn't done so, subscribe to the channel. Also go to lawncarelife.com. It's my website. You'll find the Weed Control Fertilization Academy. Also got the Bermuda zoysia program that I'm just now wrapping up. Hopefully in the next week it'll be finished, but that's available over there as well. I'm adding the final videos to that. But I hope this helped you. Leave comments below, and we'll see you guys in the next video.